Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 7 of our course, what we're calling Middle Joseon. Also, we might call it the Imjin War and the Manchu invasions. There's some debate in scholarship whether or not there is a Middle Joseon period. We're talking about, as you'll see from the timeline, a period of less than 100 years. But the immense disasters and changes that took place in that brief period of time really define a complete difference between the early Joseon dynasty and everything that comes after this period. And so it might be good to take a look at this period separately than the rest of the Joseon dynasty. Well, they say the most dangerous enemy is the one you don't see coming. And that is exactly what Korea experienced when in 1592, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the shogun of Japan, led his united armies, united for the first time in Japanese history, into international conquest, beginning with Korea. It's been noted that Korea was never Hideyoshi's objective. He was actually wanting to go to attack China, which is delusions of grandeur if he ever had any. But he asked in 1591 for Korea to just open what he called an imperial road for him to pass right through Korea on his way to attack China. Of course, Korea, being in the younger brother relationship with China, said that is not going to happen. And so Hideyoshi responded by a full-scale invasion of Japan, Japanese invasion of Korea. There had actually been a delegation of Korean officials to Hideyoshi's Japan, and they had a very mixed understanding analysis of the readiness of Japan to invade, to attack China, to attack Korea even. And so the majority view of those ministers was that there was no way the Japanese were going to be able to come over and really attack Korea. But they were extremely wrong. And one of the reasons why they were so wrong was that since 1543, the Japanese had been having visits from Europeans, from Dutch and Portuguese traders, and later Jesuit missionaries. There were whole-scale conversions of daimyo, entire areas of Japan under daimyo authority, to Catholicism in exchange for gunpowder technology and especially matchlock rifles. And so what the Koreans were not aware of was that the Japanese had matchlock rifle regiments as well as European shipbuilding technology already under their belt. And so there was a full-scale invasion of Korea. The Joseon dynasty was completely unprepared for it. The Japanese slaughtered their way through Korea up to Seoul. The king was forced to flee to the border of China and ask for help. Help was very slow in coming, and in the meantime, the Japanese simply made mincemeat out of the Korean countryside and the cities. Almost every major city was completely destroyed, burned to the ground by Hideyoshi's troops. There were a few organized efforts to defend. The Joseon armies were wiped out. There were some efforts to defend the country that were undertaken. The famous one is Yi Sun-shin, the admiral who fought 4 separate naval battles against the Japanese. One of his most famous battles was one in which he had only 10 ships against 55 Japanese warships, all of superior quality to his 10. And he nonetheless lured the Japanese Navy, into an area where he was able to get them stranded they were basically beached and slaughtered. And so it was an incredible battle. There's a great exhibit about this battle and Yi Sun-shin in the National Museum in Seoul, if you get a chance to go and check that out. The invasion of Japan ground to a standstill, partly because the Ming Chinese got into the fray, but also because of the coordinated resistance of Yi Sun-shin and a Buddhist master, a San master named Sosan Daira, who organized, if you can believe it, Buddhist monk armies to attack in a kind of guerrilla warfare style to fight against the Japanese in the mountains. So you can imagine at night these Buddhist monks armed to the teeth coming down for hand-to-hand combat with Japanese samurai. It must have been something to see. There were also organized Yangban armies where individual Yangban families would gather peasants together, arm them with sticks, knives, whatever, and also do hit-and-run tactics on the Japanese as they were trying to occupy Korea. So this eventually wore Hideyoshi's troops down. They began negotiations in 1593, and this went on until 1597. Finally, the negotiations broke down. The Japanese invaded a second time, but this time the Koreans were much more successful in their defense with the assistance of the Chinese. Japan never really got a foothold in Korea during the second invasion. And unfortunately, as the remainders of the Korean fleet were attacking the fleeing Japanese army, they destroyed hundreds of ships, but Yi Sun-shin was caught by a stray musket ball and passed away. He was killed in that final battle against the Japanese. All told, 2 to 4 million Koreans were killed during the warfare, civilian and military. That could be up to 50% of the population of the entire peninsula was wiped out during those invasions. Unfortunately for the Koreans, it didn't take long until someone else came after them. This time it was the Manchus. They were in the process of overtaking and finally conquering the Ming dynasty in China. They came to Korea and said, you need to be our servants, not the Mings. And of course, the Koreans didn't think that was a good idea. The Manchus retaliated with an invasion. They occupied the northern part of Korea, secured a pledge of loyalty from the king, and then retreated. A couple of years later, in 1636, because Joseon never sent troops in their agreement that they had with the Manchus attacked once again. They took the crown prince and his 2 brothers hostage to enforce the agreement that they made with Korea. And so Korea did eventually have to send troops and help support the Manchus against the Ming, and the Manchus overthrew the Ming dynasty, and they began what's called the Qing dynasty, Qing, the Qing dynasty. And then they did, in good faith, release those 3 princes and allow them to go back home. And so Korea found itself once again somewhat independent, but actually subsidiary to a greater power. But it was independent of occupation. And the miracle of this period is that Korea survived at all as an independent nation, and that the Joseon dynasty did not come to an end. That line of rulers continued right through this disastrous period into what we will later hear about, the late period of Joseon and the coming of the Western powers in the 19th century.